أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, we will continue discussing 22nd word, second station, which was in general for the divine unity. And these were the interpretations of the verses, which goes as, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. God is the creator of all things, and he is the guardian and disposer of all affairs. To him belong the keys of the heavens and the earth. Quran chapter 39, verse 62. So glory to him in whose hands is the sovereignty of all things, and to him will you all be brought back. Chapter 36, verse 83. And there is not a thing but its sources and treasures inexhaustible are with us, but we only send down thereof in due and ascertainable measures. Chapter 15, verse 21. There is not a moving creature, but he has grasp of its forelock. Verily it is my sustainer that is on a straight path. Chapter 39, verse 62. These are the motivating verses, or the verses that are being interpreted within the parts that we are now studying. So we went through first flash, second flash, and last week third flash. And inshallah, this week we will study fourth flash, which is page 306 in the version that I have.
Fourth flash. Look carefully at the multicolored, multifarious beings swimming in the seas of the heavens and scattered over the face of the earth. You will see that on each are inimitable signatures of the pre-eternal Son. Just as the stamps on life and seals on living beings are apparent, and we saw one or two of them, so are there such signatures on the giving of life. Since comparisons bring profound meanings closer to the understanding, we shall demonstrate this truth with a comparison. For example, from the planets to droplets of water, to fragments of glass and sparkling snowflakes, a signature from the sun's image and reflection, a luminous work particular to the sun is apparent. If you do not accept the tiny suns apparent in those innumerable things to be the manifestation of the sun's reflection, you have to accept the actual existence of a true, natural sun in every droplet and fragment of glass facing the light, and in every transparent speck before it, thus descending to the depths of lunacy. In just the same way, there is such a signature on all living beings in regard to the giving of life from among the luminous manifestations of the pre-eternal Son, that supposing all causes were gathered together and had the power to act and possessed will, they still could not imitate that signature. For living beings, all miracles of divine power are points of focus of the divine names, which are like the rays of the pre-eternal Sun. If that strange inscription of art, that wondrous ordering of wisdom, that manifestation of the mystery of oneness on living beings is not ascribed to the single and eternally besought one, it necessitates accepting that concealed within each living creature, and even in a fly or a flower, is an infinite creative power, a knowledge encompassing all things, an absolute will with which to govern the universe, and even the eternal attributes particular to the necessarily existent one, thus following to the most ludicrous degree of misguidance and superstition. Quite simply, it necessitates attributing divinity to each particle of the flower or fly, for a state has been given to those particles, especially if they are seeds, whereby they look to the living being of which they are a part, and take up a position in accordance with its systems and ordering. The particle is even in a position to look to all members of the species to which its living being belongs, or to fly with wings in order to be planted in a place suitable to the continuation of its species and to plant the species' flag. In fact, it holds a position whereby that living beings' transactions with all other beings may be continued, and its relations with them connected with sustenance, for it is in need of all of them. Thus, if that particle is not an official of a possessor of absolute power, and if its relation with him is severed, it has to be ascribed an eye which sees all things and a consciousness which encompasses all things. In short, if the miniature suns and various colors and droplets of water and fragments of glass are not attributed to the sun's reflection and the manifestation of its reflection, one has to accept the existence of innumerable suns in place of the one sun. It necessitates accepting an utterly impossible superstition. In exactly the same way, if everything is not attributed to the absolutely powerful one, it necessitates accepting infinite gods instead of the single God. Indeed, gods to the number of particles in existence, thus falling to the degree of accepting a hundredfold impossibility.
Would you like to have some initial comments?
So I don't remember everything I read, but the second flash, I'm trying to understand. Second flash, we were talking about everything is connected. Third flash, we were talking about more about the creation aspect of how everything is connected, like the experience, seeing that, I think, or that's what I remember. And now we're talking about, I think we came to the conclusion that everything has this immense sign on it, or a signature on it, that shows that it points somewhere, or that it belongs to one owner. And now are we talking about how, what if that sign was not actually one person, but just it owned the signature itself? If we just looked at things as if they were capable of, like, let's say a beautiful piece of art could somehow be its own creation. I mean, that doesn't make sense maybe, but we're looking at how signatures look to themselves. And you'll see that, so in the second sentence it says, you will see that on each are inimitable signatures of the pre-eternal Son. So Nebras just came, you said inimitable can't be imitated, right? So we see that on everything there are signatures that cannot be imitated, and now we're exploring whether or not these signatures could actually belong to the things themselves. And if that was true, then it would be like some ludicrous thing, like there'd be infinite amounts of suns or something. So we know that the signatures point somewhere and they don't like exist by themselves.
Yeah, and in the next sentence it says, just as the stamps on life and seals on living beings are apparent, and we saw one or two of them in the previous parts. So in the second flash, third flash, fourth flash, we all are looking at those inimitable stamps. In the second flash, it was on living beings. In the third flash, just I need to remember very quickly, because now we are just adding another one. So the first one, the second flash was about life. The third flash was about living beings. And now in the fourth flash, it's about the act of giving life. So now we are looking at different things, because this is how the initial example was at the very beginning. In the first flash, he was giving us a metaphor. In a market, a lot of stuff comes in, and the second type of personality was looking at every single thing and was observing a stamp on it. So in the second flash, he looked at life, and over life, which was the theme of second flash, was making one thing from several things and making several things out of a single thing, which was being observed over life. He said this is a stamp. In the third flash, he gave the example of how living beings are miniature of the whole cosmos. So whoever makes the whole existence is the maker of a tiny living being. So now we are observing this stamp over living beings. Now in the fourth flash, his claim is, so are there such signatures on the giving of life. Now we are looking at the act of giving life, another thing that comes to the market. And now over this, he is going to look for a stamp. All of them are stamps, all of them are inimitable signatures, but they are over different material that comes to the marketplace. Yes. If there's any comments, please go ahead. Any comments from online participants about the rest of the text or the beginning of the text, please? Well, actually, we better have a moderator from online. Starting from top, I see Asim. Asim, would you like? Or maybe from bottom, Suhail. Who wants to be the moderator today? Help us, please. Awesome.
Assalamu alaikum. Sure. Inshallah. Good. Okay. So, yeah, so as you were just introducing the subject about this fourth flash, so that inimitable part is also very important in terms of how he's saying every sign, every signature is something that can only be pointed or can be referenced to something that must be eternal, must be absolute. So it cannot be something that belongs to anything in the universe, in the creation. So that was that. And here, as Yusuf, you mentioned about this particular stamp is about the act of life. So just as the phrase says, just as the stamps on life and seals on living beings are apparent, and we saw one or two of them, so are there such signatures on the giving of life. So now he's talking about the giving of life in terms of the act of life that is apparent in all around you, in terms of whatever you see in the universe. There you can see the manifestation of that act being displayed, that there is life that is giving, including yourself as a human being, and then the you name it in terms of the whatever, the plants and the animals and the universe in general is all giving a form of life. So then, yeah, so from there he starts to, he gives an example. He says in the next paragraph, so how we can understand this particular act, and that this is something that is a manifestation rather than the actual source, as he says, that you cannot fathom that this belongs to the thing itself, or this is the actual eternal sun, but it is something that is a reflection or a manifestation of things, with the example of the sun and its reflection. So before we go to the example, anybody else who wants to add anything to this introduction or wants to say something or comment, please go ahead. Okay, so if not, let's go to the example. So in the example, let me read it again. For example, from the planets to droplets of water. So that basically includes pretty much the whole universe. From a single droplet, you can go to the whole planet, to fragments of glass and sparkling snowflakes. So a signature from the sun's image and reflection. So as a metaphor, the sun is image and reflection is being reflected on all these things, the droplets, to the planets, to the snowflakes, everything that is encompassed within the reflection of the sun. And that is apparent, it's within the human experience. If you do not accept the tiny suns apparent in those innumerable things to be the manifestation of the sun's reflection, you have to accept the actual existence of a true natural sun in every droplet and fragment of glass facing the light, and in every transparent speck before it, thus descending to the depths of lunacy. So here, I mean, so in our every experience that every human being faces or sees, we all see that there's life in everything, mostly. So let's say in the, in terms of the example he's giving, in terms of the reflection on the droplet of water or on the planets, we see that it is brought about for our experience, that we are able to experience that that they exist, and their existence does not belong to them, but they are there. So the light of the sun is shining. That's in terms metaphorically, that there's a seal of the sun in every being out there. So that reflection or that shiningness, or that can be the analogy of the life. So one cannot deny that there is life in something, or there is this act of reflection in them. So the light is there, but now, does this light come from them, or is there something that is not part of them that is causing that reflection? So is there the sun that is independently existing, or is there a sun that is in each of those elements or in each of those things? So that's where he says either you have to accept either one or the other. And the other one, where you say that the sun is in each and every element, is not acceptable. So please, if you have any more comment or anything, just please go ahead. Raise your hand, or you can write it on the chat. This is at least how I am understanding it. So, the focus, at least in the fourth flash, is more on the act of giving of life. So this example is, again, I would see this example as something that is, tying the act of giving life. Either we can see that the things are given life by themselves, or they are there, or there's some source behind it that is reflecting what with this act of giving life, that these things are not given life by themselves. So okay, so is any comment, any question, any addition, Yusuf, you want to make from there?
So far, so good.
Okay, inshallah. So let's go and see how he ties that analogy again in the next paragraph. In just the same way, there is such a signature on all living beings in regard to the giving of life. So so now he's saying, just like from the example that he shows, that all living beings are also show that the giving of life is coming from the pre-eternal sun, as he mentions in the example, from among the luminous manifestations of the pre-eternal sun, that supposing all causes were gathered together and had the power to act and possessed will, they still could not imitate that signature. So even if one supposes that all causes were gathered together and had the power to act and possessed will, they still could not imitate this act or this giving existence of life. Even if you have the will as a human being, or as any other being, human beings being the most, smartest and with the most qualities. Yes, so even if you gather all of the best minds and scientists and everyone, or still that act of giving existence to life is not possible, because everybody is, even though we have the will that we have, or whatever the the power that we are given, it's all something that is reflected. It is not something that is innate to us, but they are all a reflection of something a reflection of a being that is the source behind it that can give existence to all that. So whatever the causes that are, whatever basically is created in the universe, nothing can be the source behind that act of giving life. Maybe somebody can simplify this in a better words. Anybody wants to do that? Okay, so if not, let's go on to the next part of the phrase. I'm reading from the text. For living beings, all miracles of divine power are points of focus of the divine names. This is an interesting phrase. So for living beings, all miracles of divine power are points of focus of the divine names, which are like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. So now, at least in this phrase, now is anybody who is living, who has the life and the qualities to experience things, is experiencing nothing but the miracles of qualities, or such as divine power and the other divine names and the points of focus of the divine names. And these are all manifestations or reflections that are emanating from the pre-eternal sun, or the source of all these qualities.
Azim, here is a question from Abdurrahman. He says, what does pre-eternal sun mean? He says, this is not a name of God.
So, pre-eternal sun is the way the author is using as the analogy of the sun. So when from what I take it, when he says the pre-eternal sun, it means the source behind all the reflections of any quality that is experienced in the universe. So just like the light is a reflection of the sun, so let's say the mercy is a reflection of a pre-eternal source of mercy, or the eternal source of mercy. I guess you can remove maybe the pre and just see the eternal part of it. So a source that must be eternal or absolute. So anything that is experienced in terms of the quality is like a ray of reflection of an absolute source. Does that make sense to Abdurrahman?
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, I think it was probably Yusuf that mentioned this about the sun and the ray, but how it says, for living beings, all miracles of divine power are points of focus of the divine names, which are like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. And in the rays of the sun, we know, it encompasses like all the colors. It's not just one color, it's like all like, multiple colors in there. So just as it's a focus of the divine names, just like the sun, in one ray, it encompasses all these different colors. There's also like an analogy being made there too, how life is like a ray which encompasses all the divine names. Not from me though.
Yeah, thank you. That was very good. Thanks for adding that. So I see Aisha Nur had her hand up. Aisha Nur, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm a little confused by this sentence, and I'm trying to see how I can articulate my question about it. I guess, the point where it says the divine names are like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. The rays of the sun reach an object or are reflected in various objects, right? But in so much as the analogy goes, I guess, the objects themselves are also, in a sense, comprised of reflections and manifestations of the divine names themselves as well, right? So it's not just rays or manifestations of divine names reaching an object, but the object itself being comprised of that in its entirety. or else there becomes, I feel, this separation between the manifested aspects of divine names and the matter itself. But the matter itself must also be the manifestation or reflection of those divine names as well. I don't know if that's very clear. I guess I'm trying to make sense of it myself as well. But I guess it's just, I guess like I just want to unpack this sentence a bit more, or if you could just talk about it a bit more, because it's a little confusing for me.
So if I understand you correctly, so you said, so some are the qualities, and you said the matter also is a reflection. Is that, did I get you correct? So in the matter, the physical material is also something that is a reflection.
Right. I mean, I guess, you know, if I think about a drop of water and a ray of sunlight being reflected in it, the drop of water is in that sense separate from the ray of light being manifested on it. But if we make the analogy of rays of sunlight being like divine names, or like the manifestations of divine names, then, you know, the droplet itself can't have a separate existence from those manifestations of divine names either. So I guess it was just, I don't know if it's the wording or just thinking of divine names as being like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. That seems a bit, I guess, limiting of how the divine names actually manifest themselves, or must be manifested in a sense. Yeah.
So in terms of the like the analogy that he's using, which are like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. So in terms, like everything, for example, that's matter and or physical matter, and the thing that is qualities. I don't think it's not like you're separating, or is he separating the matter and the qualities, right? Because if there is no quality, then there is really nothing to talk about and no matter to discuss or anything. But I feel that in the author's example is using just the analogy to point out that each reflection of the, you know, coming from the sun is something that points again to the actual sun. So everything that is coming from the ray or the reflection of the sun has its source that is belongs to. And these rays are nothing but something, even the matter, or is nothing but the divine names, or it's the qualities that would reflect again back to the pre-eternal sun. But again, if Yusuf, go ahead, please.
So just to clarify what Aisha Nur said, I mean, she made a comment, actually, it was not a question, because in here people were asking what's the question. So yeah, of course, this is a metaphor, and it's a limited metaphor. I mean, in this metaphor, there is sun, there is, if you like, a mirror, such as water droplet, and then the sun is manifesting on this mirror. So the reflection is from sun, but the existence of water droplet is, in this metaphor, independent of sun. So in my reality, though, in this existence, for example, when I say God is manifesting on me, this is a incomplete sentence, incomplete statement. It implies as if I exist independently, and then as a mirror, and then God is manifesting on me. But in fact, me is also a manifestation, or flower is a manifestation by itself. But when we say flower is manifesting as if flower is an entity, colorless entity, as if out there, but then God is manifesting his, knowledge, art on it. Maybe a proper way to say it is knowledge and power and wisdom is being manifested through or with the flower. So this is, I guess, a update for what's going on with the metaphor.
Great. Anybody else wants to follow up or want to add something?
Maybe just one small point. So at the very introduction of Fourth Flesh, he was talking about look carefully at the multicolored, multifarious beings swimming in the seas of the heavens and scattered over the face of the earth. You will see that on each are inimitable signatures of pre-eternal Son. So in there he was, if I take it literally, he is talking about colorful things in the heavens and the earth. Colorful things on earth are flowers, trees, everything has a color anyways. And also for the things in the heavens, like stars, whatnot, they have different colors. In a sense, it looks like he's using it metaphorically. Color is sort of a property, like properties of things. Color is a property, smell is a property, size is a property. So like colorful things means that things with properties. So all these properties are manifestations. So pay attention to that. I guess this is what I am reading, the introduction sentence. I'm reading it as look at things. You will see various reflections, properties, different colors. So color pointing to multiple features in here, if you think in terms of machine learning. So multiple features. And these all are reflections of a pre-eternal Son. All the qualities that you observe, all the properties, features that you observe, that as they are being manifest in existence, they are either coming from a pre-eternal Son or they themselves should be the source of existence of all these.
Yeah, that's very nice. Thank you for that addition. The multicolored, multifarious as a metaphor to all the reflections of the rays. I think that's what he meant also by that. We only saw one or two of them. So, but be aware that it is very multicolored, multifarious in terms of the qualities are very diverse. There is a lot of divine names or qualities that can be unpacked and experienced. Any more comments or questions? So if not, we can continue with the paragraph. Yes, Muhammad Said, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question. In the Fourth Flash, the author mentioned this phrase 2 times so far as I see, giving of life, or the signatures on the giving of life, and which seems he is using it as something different than life. I would like to read this sentence in the second sentence of the Fourth Flash. Just as the stamps on life and seals on living beings are apparent, so stamps on life and seals on living beings are apparent, and we saw 1 or 2 of them, so are there such signatures on the giving of life. So he makes a difference here, and then he mentions the same phrase in the 3rd paragraph. So what is the difference between the stamps on life and the the seals on living, signatures on the giving of life? This is a question I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Muhammad Said. Yeah, that's a great question. So what is the difference between the seal of life and then the signature on the giving of life? So one is something that I think it seems more something like you see it, but any quality that you experience life, you see that something is living, and the other is that thing is there's an act that is going on, something that is very dynamic in terms of the action. For example, every moment you still see that particular life, so it makes it more living and more dynamic, is how I'm seeing it. Versus, we would think that, okay, this is something that is life is given, and then, maybe the bird is now living by itself, for example. The life on the bird is there, but at every moment there is an act that is in place. So the ray is continuously shining, the ray of the sun. So the act of giving life is continuously happening. So Muhammad Said, please go ahead.
Sorry, it was a mistake.
No worries. I hope that if that made sense, or anybody wants to further add to this or clarify this further, feel free to do that. Okay, so if not, we can move on to the next phrase in the third paragraph. So we discuss, for living beings, all miracles of divine power are points of focus of the divine names, and which are like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. If that strange inscription of art, so that strange inscription of art, that wondrous ordering of wisdom, that manifestation of the mystery of oneness on living beings, is not ascribed to the single and eternally besought one, it necessitates accepting that concealed within each living creature, such as even in a fly or a flower, is an infinite creative power, a knowledge encompassing all things, an absolute will with which to govern the universe, and even the eternal attributes particular to the necessarily existent one, thus falling to the most ludicrous degree of misguidance and superstition. So now that he says that you see, or you're witnessing all those miracles of divine power and seeing the divine names, which are the rays of belonging to an eternal source or eternal sun. So if that's, it's called a strange inscription of art, so the reflection, the giving of form, the shape, and the ordering of things, that shows that things are purposefully there. There's a sign of wisdom. And the different stamps that we are, again, we are seeing being manifested, as was highlighted by Abdul Rahman and Yusuf, in terms of the multicolored, multifarious beings that are being observed, in terms of the multifarious color being pointing to all the different varieties of qualities that are being manifested on the things. So if they are not ascribed to a single and eternally besought one, all these qualities, then it necessitates accepting that each one is capable, or is able to, or has within itself the knowledge, the power, the will for those qualities, which is completely unacceptable, or it makes no sense logically. Yeah, so it becomes superstition and misguidance. So Yusuf, please go ahead.
It might be a little bit of sidetrack, but since it's mentioned in the text, I'd like to bring it to discussion. So in between lines, he says, for living beings, all miracles of divine power are points of focus of the divine names, which are like the rays of the pre-eternal sun. He is defining divine names as the rays of the pre-eternal sun. I don't know if anybody would like to make any comment about that, or divine names being, metaphorically speaking, rays of the pre-eternal sun. But it might take us a little bit off track, so just if anybody wants to make any comment about that.
Yeah, I think we touched upon that a little bit, but if anybody else wants to add anything to that, feel free. Abdurrahman, you want to add something to that? Or maybe Suhail? Well, we have Fariha, Aisha Nur, a lot of people. Khadija. So yeah, the metaphor, as Yusuf is highlighting, that each ray, as in the ray, each ray of light that comes from the sun is nothing but the quality or the manifestation of that reflection of light is what the manifestation of divine name is. So through each reflection of the ray of light, you can go back to and point to the pre-eternal sun in the analogy, or the source behind that particular quality that is experienced. Well, Yusuf, since you brought it up, can you please speak on it and break this down a little bit?
So, I mean, since he is as if making a distinction between the sun and the rays of the sun, because when we talk about the absolute source, we also talk about, let's say, mercy, divine mercy. We talk about divine knowledge, for instance, which we say is different than the divine essence. And as if in here he is, I mean, my understanding is an implication that still divine names are somehow relatable to us, but they are not sun. They are rays of sun. So we cannot, as per definition of absolute, we cannot talk about anything about the absolute. We cannot define absolute. We cannot, I mean, there's no features of absolute. Absolute is unshapable, undefinable in any shape or form. But we talk about names of God. So names of God is as if, in my understanding, I am describing the Creator with these. So I say merciful Creator. It somewhat gives me the feeling that my mother is merciful, God is merciful, as if there is some sort of a common ground. So, I mean, this rays of light are not sun itself. So divine names are a way for us to me, an easy word to say it is, it's a level of abstraction to make me realize somewhat or interact with my maker, but it's not my maker. Because in some sense, still it is defining or describing the source. So in a sense, tying it back to Aisha Nur's point, divine names themselves, in my perception, also becomes a manifestation. And just as a side note, it can stay there. We can discuss it later on. So that much I would say now.
Okay, thanks for highlighting that. So what we experience, the divine names, that is all, as we see, is a reflection, and because we see that the thing where it's manifested or reflected on cannot be the source behind it, and that quality is something that is for me just to make sense of things. But then when I go to the source of that particular quality, then I can make a conclusion and logically that, yeah, this quality or whatever this name I experienced, for example, name of beauty. So whatever the beauty I experienced is a ray or a reflection that is coming from the all beauteous one, or the eternally beautiful one.
Or simply the one.
Yeah, the one. Yeah, alhamdulillah, thank you. So yeah, any more comments or any more side points? They're all good. So if not, we'll continue with the third paragraph. Where are we now? So yeah, so I'm in the phrase of quite simply. It necessitates attributing divinity to each particle of the flower or fly. So if we don't see that these are reflections or manifestations, as Yusuf was highlighting, then it necessitates attributing divinity to each particle of the flower or the fly. So add the divinity in terms of the absoluteness or the source behind, the source of existence of that particular quality. Yeah. Then it necessitates that each thing, each particle, each flower has that particular, is the source. So that is why it is very important to understand that just whatever we are experiencing, all those qualities are just our reflections, are the manifestations, and they point to the eternal source behind them. So they are themselves not the actual, or the divine name, as Yusuf was putting it, or they don't have themselves, the qualities don't have, or the thing that themselves do not have the divinity for those qualities to be there. So quite simply, it necessitates attributing divinity to each particle of the flower or fly. For a state has been given to those particles. For a state has been given to those particles, especially if they are in seeds, whereby they look to the living being of which they are a part. They look to the living being of which they are a part and take up a position in accordance with its systems and ordering. So a state has been given to those particles, especially if they are in seeds. So now he's saying, okay, let's look at the seeds, whereby the state of the seed, the way it is made, look to the living being of which they are a part, and take up a position in accordance with the systems and ordering of the living being. Does anybody want to talk on this particular phrase? Or maybe let's combine the next one also. So the particle is even in a position to look to all members of the species to which its living being belongs, or to fly with wings, in order to be planted in a place suitable, fly with wings in order to be planted in a place suitable to the continuation of its species, and to plant the species flag. In fact, the particle or the seed holds a position whereby that living being's transactions with all other beings may be continued, and its relations with them connected with sustenance, and its relations with the living being's transaction with all the beings may be continued, and its relations with them connected with sustenance, for it is in need of all of them. So who would want to talk to this? What is the author really saying about the particles taking up a position where they are so well organized, and there is this, the system and ordering in a position is, and it looks to, it's connected so well to the other members of its being. Anybody wants to clarify this? Nobody?
So maybe you should pick up on some names.
Okay, so Suhail, are you available? Okay, so Suhail is not responding. So Fariha, would you want to comment on this?
Assalamu alaikum. Which part? Can you refer me to the text again?
Yeah, towards the end of the page where it says, for a state has been given to those particles, especially if they are in seeds.
For a state has been given to those particles, especially if they are in seeds, whereby they look to the living being of which they are a part and take up a position in accordance with its systems and ordering. What's the point being made here? So after sort of reflecting on the manifestation of the qualities that I'm made to observe in creation of things, then I also, I don't know, like, then I also observe that how everything is intricately, positioned in a well-ordered fashion, right? So even, what does this refer to, or this points to, like a one that brings about the order into existence. So it seems that the order is like a constant, what do you say, thing that I observe in the universe, and attributing, yeah, so let's sorry, I'm just like reading out here with you guys. I don't know, trying to see the point here. And then it says the particle is even in a position to look to all members of the species to which its living beings belong. So yes, you cannot talk about an object without talking about its part. And similarly, when you look or you study a part of an object, that it directs you obviously, to the whole object itself. So again, going back from studying creation from the macro to the micro level, and vice versa, from the micro to the macro level, everything points to or necessitate the existence of a necessarily existent one. I don't know, that's what I took away right now, but go ahead, anyone, if you want to further elaborate on this.
Yeah, thank you. Aisha Nur, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that was very helpful, and I was just thinking of how to bring this example home, and I don't know if it'll perfectly align with what the text is saying, but I've been just thinking about lately, like the eyes of a cat, like the pupils, the black parts in their eyes, and when they get excited, when a cat gets excited, like let's say you're playing a game with them, or they heard something, or they hear like their favorite meal wrapper can being opened, like their eyes get really big and black. The pupils just immediately enlarge. And other times, that pupil is like a thin slit, very thin, and the rest of the eye is very colorful. And I was just thinking, like it happens automatically. I don't think the cat is aware necessarily of the fact that, okay, I'm getting excited, so I better make my pupils grow larger so that I can hunt better or see better or have intake more light. For that sort of thing to happen, one would also need to know the mechanisms of the rest of the universe, as we usually talk about it, but just even like the rest of the mechanisms of a room, or how light works and the function of light, and et cetera, I guess. But I just thought it was very interesting how this very small aspect of an animal functions perfectly, and along those lines, like the cat itself functions perfectly, just knows how to do everything immediately and superbly well. If it wants to look cute, it knows how to look cute. It just does everything perfectly, in a sense where it can't know or have the knowledge to be engineering or directing all those things by itself. And I know here we're talking about a particle, and we're talking about how the particle has to know about the the causal nexus of its surroundings, or of how the rest of the body may function, or how it's going to interact with every other single particle or entity or whatnot. But yeah, I just think in our interactions, or in my interactions with different things, like it's very much so manifested, even in myself, but I guess especially in cats, if we're observing them directly. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Khadija, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to bring our attention to the sentence. What is it? The third sentence in the third paragraph. It says, in the middle of that sentence, if that strange inscription of art, that wondrous ordering of wisdom, that manifestation of the mystery of oneness on living beings is not ascribed to the single and eternally besought one, it necessitates accepting that concealed within each living creature and even in a fly or a flower is an infinite creative power, a knowledge encompassing all things and absolute will with which to govern the universe and even the eternal attributes particular to the necessarily existent one. So I think the point the author is doing here is pretty straightforward as far as he's making a claim and then he's kind of saying, okay, what if this claim is not true? This is basically the other side of the coin, the only other option possible. And let's come and explore this and see to what extent this is reasonable or agreeable. And I think what the example with the seed, right? The seed represents in my mind like the starting point of it, perhaps any experience or the starting point of anything in existence. So it could be a little seed of a flower or a plant, but at the same time, like a seed is a newborn baby, or it's me having a particular experience right now that I haven't, that's new to me in this moment. Even if it may be familiar, it's still new. And in these particular beginnings, I guess, there are, like, with the seed or the baby, for example, as Aisha was alluding to with the cat example too, there is an inevitable connection. Like the baby, the moment it's born, it knows to cry, or it doesn't actually know to cry, it just cries, right? Or through its crying, then sustenance or comfort or other things necessary for as the text says, it says the particle is even in a position to look at all members of a species to which its living being belongs, or to fly with wings in order to be planted in a place suitable to the continuation of its species. Emphasis on place suitable to the continuation of its species. It knows exactly what it needs to do to make sure that the crying of a baby is very annoying to everyone. So the moment it cries, and you're like, okay, let me try to hush it. There's of course compassion involved in it, but whatever the case is, even if I'm experiencing something new, that experience in and of itself doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's like interconnected with all my other human feelings and my experiences and my existence as a whole. So only the point that's I guess coming or that attracted my attention here is that the moment you attribute one any quality to the thing itself, then it becomes inevitable that you must attribute all the other qualities somehow to that thing as well. So with the cats in the pupil, right? If the cat knows what it's doing with its pupils, then it must know that, when it does something to me, or when it looks cute to me, or when it rubs its body against my leg or something, then I know that it wants like love or food or something. It must know that this is a way of communicating with me. It must also know that there's so many different levels of understanding that is required for the cat to know. If I attribute even single minute quality to the thing, to the cat itself, or whatever it is. So it's because I think my point is a little bit redundant here, but the moment I attribute any single thing to any one thing, it's necessary by definition that I must attribute all other things to it too, because of the interconnectedness of the relationship of one thing to basically everything else in the universe. It just becomes impossible any other way.
Thank you for all these additions. So also just to add to everybody's take on this, So, the author is making the point about, as Khadija was pointing out, about that all these things can only be attributed to an eternally besought one. So all these manifestations or the qualities that is experienced cannot belong to any of those things themselves. So each particle, as we see it moving or acting, is not innate to that particular particle, but it is within the system or within the way the universe is set up, or within the order. It is given that ability, as he says, that the state has been given to those particles. So the state, whatever they are in their existence, do not belong to the particles themselves, but they are given that particular way that they are acting. So the way the cat is acting, is that particular way of the cat. It does not belong to the cat, but it's given to the cat in how it's establishing that relationship with Aisha Nur or the rest of the universe. So for another example, when I read this, to fly with wings, the particle is flying with wings in order to be planted. So I'm assuming this is like the way how the seeds and the pollination and the way, the particles are carried by, let's say, the bees or the other insects. And when I was walking back home today, I was seeing that, there was some pollen that was just, that white, thick, I don't know what it's called, but it was just going along with the wind, just like a little aircraft. And then it goes further ahead and it goes and plants somewhere else, like it lands somewhere else. I was like, how does this particle know, that it has to talk to the wind, and then it has to, with the gravity and everything that is there within this, the way the universe is set up, and then it goes and travels and then lands somewhere else. It's just a very beautiful sight, but one has to wonder, again, by witnessing all this, that who is arranging all this? How can this particle, travel from the air and then goes all the way to the other part of let's say the land or the park where I was at. So again, tying it back to the subject, so all these are qualities, the act of the state of the particle being in flight, of it traveling, its relationship with the air and the sun and the atmosphere, and then it's landing into this relationship with the soil. All that is given and is purposefully arranged for that particle to happen. So again, going back to that, all these things that we are witnessing, we cannot say that the particle has the knowledge, the will, the power, because we don't see that in the particles itself to be the result of whatever I am witnessing. But those particles, again, are showing that the manifestations or that they are given that particular state. And that's how they are able to interact with the rest of the universe. And I see some comments, so let me read from Khadija. The moment I attribute any quality to that one thing itself, I have to either attribute every other quality to it or attribute the manifestation of every quality to the things they seem to be emitting from. That makes sense. And Yusuf wants to add something. Go ahead, Yusuf.
Well, when you were giving the example of this Holland that was flying, it reminded me of humans. Yesterday there was a brother here, and he was planning for, actually he was dreaming for having PhD. I said, why don't you consider having it in the United States? He says, well, can it really happen? And then I tell him, yeah, it can happen this way, that way, then lay in front of him some ways. Then it makes sense for him. So this brother is living in another country and not in a major city of that country. So for him, it was unimaginable, unthinkable. It was just a dream to just depart from that country, land in this country, but as if somebody needs to lay the path for this intelligent being, a human, but since the destination is unknown, let's say he says, okay, I know that country, the country that he lives in, I can live in here, maybe get into a PhD program in this country, but departing from this country, going to a totally different environment and finding my way in here into an education system that I do not know of, it's really something beyond me, so he doesn't even attempt doing it. But the Poland that Asim was seeing, departing from one part of the park or city, flying in the air, landing in another part, and just starting working in there, as Nursi says, planting the flag of its species, saying that now we are starting a new business, new life in here on behalf of my species. So this was it's a very beautiful practical example that Nursi is laying in front of us in here. And in our day-to-day life, we live this, and we do say that, yeah, I need some guidance. So who is guiding this particle? So as if, because wherever it goes, it can just utilize the air for free and goes and starts living elsewhere. It's really demonstrating something in front of our eyes.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I mean, it's amazing actually how this interconnectedness is working. So, any other comment, or anybody else wants to say something? So I think we are almost done with this paragraph. So for it is in need of all of them. That's the last sentence. So all these relations that, as Yusuf was saying about the person who wants to do a PhD and this path and this journey, everything is, so that person is in need of all the relations with the rest of the universe to come to his, whatever the result that he's seeking. So same thing with the way the particle, in terms of the pollen, the way it's has that, forms that relationship with the rest of the universe, it is in need of all of that. So moving on to the next page. So reading on, thus, if that particle is not an official of a possessor of absolute power, if that particle is not an official of a possessor of absolute power, and if its relation with him is severed, it has to be ascribed an I which sees all things and a consciousness which encompasses all things. So tying that point about that the particle is an official, it's not the owner of the absolute power, but it's an official and of the one, the source behind the absolute power. And it's always going back to Muhammad Said's point about the relationship with the source must be continuous. It's not like a one-time relationship, but this must be a very lively, active relationship with him. So it cannot be, if it's severed, then at that moment, whenever it's severed, that official becomes something that becomes the absolute, or must be the one that has all those, possessor of all those qualities. So I see Aisha Noor's hand. Please go ahead, Aisha Noor.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I'm just wondering, what would it mean for a particle to be an official of a possessor of absolute power? I mean, how would that be, like, what, how can a particle, what does it mean for a particle to be an official of a possessor of absolute power? Does it mean that it's given partial power, or just the veil of power, or I don't know, any some clarification on that would be helpful. Thank you.
Good question. So Fariha, you want to answer that? Go ahead.
Pretty much what I put on the chat box. I was also thinking what's an official, basically based on what we know here in our experiences, right? Somebody who's assigned a duty to perform. And I mean, in the case, or the way things are brought about here, from what I observe, I mean, everything is fulfilling its duty. Everything has a purpose. So going back to that pollen example, I mean, it's also made to perform its duty, right? It's following a perfect order where it's being located from point A to point B. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yes, things are given. There's the qualities or what they're made to perform. So I don't know if that makes sense. If somebody else can clarify it further.
Sure, yeah, so they become official if we understand what that particle is doing. Like if we observe and study that particle and see that all those things through like those things that I'm observing the particle, the relationships it has is not from the particle, but it's belonging to the one who gives, the source behind it. So the pre-eternal sun, again, going back to the analogy. So now that whatever the light I was seeing, the shining or the various multicolored things I'm seeing on the particle, all of a sudden take me to the pre-eternal sun or the absolute source behind all those qualities. So that particle now becomes an official because it helps me to understand what this source behind all these qualities could be. And Yusuf has his hand up, so please go ahead.
So a few pages ago, at the first flash, author made a statement about this point actually. So the officials of, so this is where am I reading from? A reminder within the first point. After a few sentences, the officials of the pre-eternal monarch are not executives of the sovereignty of dominicality. They are the heralds of his sovereignty and the observers and the superintendents of his dominicality. Their purpose is to make known the dignity of power and majesty of dominicality, so that power should not be seen to be associated with base and lowly matters, not like a human king, tainted by impotence and indigence, who therefore takes officials as partners. So this, I guess, while discussing this part, we talked about this, but if it needs further discussion, we can go back there again.
Thank you. So I assume the comment is from you also, Yusuf, about divine unity and glory require it to be thus.
Yeah.
And necessitate their independence.
Yes.
The officials, okay, yeah, I'll just read it again. The officials of the pre-eternal monarch are not executives of the sovereignty of dominicality. They are the heralds of his sovereignty and the observers and superintendents of his dominicality. Their purpose is to make known, so that's important. Their purpose is to make known the dignity of power and majesty of dominicality, so that power should not be seen to be associated with base and lowly matters, not like a human king, tainted by impotence and indigence, who therefore takes officials as partners. So pretty much what Yusuf was explaining. Thank you very much. So, okay. And there's more comments. Aisha, would you like to speak to that, or you want me to read it?
No, yeah, so that makes sense. So it's, in a sense, the lack of action or the lack of power, or lack of execution of a thing that makes it an official. In a sense, its inability to do anything is what makes it perform its duty, which is almost inaction or action by inaction, since it forces you to look for one who can actually be the source of whatever you're observing. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you. At least to the extent that I understand it.
Sounds good. Fariha, you want to add something?
No, but I need your help here. Or maybe the text that was posted up by Hamim, right? That says the officials of the pre-eternal monarch are not executives of the sovereignty of dominicality. They are the heralds of his sovereignty. Are not executives. I mean, I don't know what would that encompass. Like executive, like why are you even mentioning that? Like, what should I be thinking about it? But they are the heralds of his sovereignty. So the purpose is, they're employed to make known that, I guess, divine power and right? So what do you understand from they're not executives? Like if somebody's an official, right, you're working for so and so, aren't you technically an executive? Or I don't know, I'm just thinking about that.
Right, being an executive means you hold some power, you hold the authority, and you can execute something. So being a herald or being an official means you are given and you are accepting and you're portraying and reflecting that these are things are given. So that's not owning the qualities to yourself. So like you don't, the executive or executing, as an analogy, means that you have something within you that with your own judgment, with your own power, you can execute something. So they're in that sense, they're not executives. And I think Aisha Nur put something, I think executive in this context is being the one who implements, creates. Yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, in the corporate, for example, executives, as the word now is used very, in this culture. So everybody, the executive or chief executive would make decisions, and the decisions belong to that person, and the marketing executive will take decisions that belong to that person. So that's not what the executive, what a herald or an official is supposed to be. So they're not supposed to be like everything. They acknowledge that everything is, as the phrase that I used to put up. They're heralds of. There are always heralds that they point whatever that is given to them. They point to the one who has given to them. So they don't hold it to themselves, but they say that this has been given to me by the one who holds the absolute qualities of those things.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Awesome.
No worries. And Yusuf, please go ahead.
So it was just for, it is likely, it's possible that we understand as if, actually this was what initially Aisha Nur was attracting our attention to, because in the metaphor, water droplets were independently existing than the sun, but the reflection was coming from sun. This was the limitation of the metaphor. And Aisha Nur was saying, in reality, there is no independent entity on which divine names are manifesting. So there's this problem in the metaphor in there. Likewise, in the metaphor of existence, commonly, it's a very common thought, actually, that existence exists, and now, and just to sound a bit more religious, we call it God created matter, let's say, but then now God gives command to the matter, and the matter acts according to this command. Or a more religious version of this is angels are performing duties. So God says, do this, and then angel goes and does such and such. Or rain, it is raining because God gives command to an angel, and then angel goes and executes this command, meaning that it is the doer of this action. So Nursi is saying that this is a wrong understanding. So this is a metaphor. Yeah, okay, Quran is also using the soldiers of Creator, Junudullah, but this doesn't mean that, for example, a commander-in-chief goes to a war with the army. He doesn't fight with the enemy by himself. Yeah, he gives commands to the soldier, and soldiers shoot the bullets. So this is not the case how it's happening in existence. Yeah, the metaphor of an army makes sense for existence to demonstrate that there is an order within existence, but this doesn't and shouldn't mean that the agents in this existence are not really agents. They are not doers of actions. They are simply announcers, if you like. Herald means announcer. It makes you know about its source. But he also says they are observers. Superintendent is an observer in the original text. So they also observe those manifestations. So it's an announcer and observer. It's sort of, this is very much aligned with the first command of read, Iqra, and also the way that Nursi is interpreting existence along the line of this verse, existence is a book. So everything in this book is an announcer, because every word in the book is announcing you a message. So it's not doing anything other than that. It's just like a scene in the movie. But also he says, the thing itself is also an observer, as much as I am an observer. For example, right now I am speaking some words. I am manifesting some knowledge of my maker. So I am an announcer in this sense. And I am also observing what is being manifested through me right now. Because it happens a lot actually that I hear the things for the first time when I speak about them during the discussion. So for a fact, I know that this is not for me, for example. So I guess these are the two things that author was emphasizing in there, because these are very common pitfalls that human intellect can fall into. So he's just closing that door from there.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. So this is you said it's a common pitfall in terms of seeing like a one-time creation, and then the things continue on with their own existence, and then as if there is no more relationship or tying to an absolute source. I mean, yeah, this is something I see that, you know, everybody can see that actually, how we live. So that's why it's good to be more mindful and really practice and really benefit from this, whatever this author is actually teaching us on this dynamic, this continuous bond with the source of our existence. So, and then acting as the official. Any comment or any other thing? I think then we'll continue with the in short. Yes, Khadija, go ahead.
Very quick. Just wanted to go back to Brother Muhammad Said's point before, because I felt it was related to this. The second sentence of the first paragraph, where it says, just as the stamps on life and seals on living beings are apparent, and we saw one or two of them, so are there such signatures on the giving of life. I think what we've been talking about is like directly related to this right now, in the sense that, as you just said, Awesome, it's I think first the human intellect must first fall into the pitfall of saying, okay, God created us, and then, or we have been created, and then we've been given life, almost like a clock system. But then first falling into that pitfall, and then further questioning, well, can this really be so, or is there first seeing the stamps on, at least what I understand is the stamps on life and seals on living beings, is that when I experience existence, I myself, I'm pretty sure I'm alive, and I see many things that seem to have life around me as well. But then coming to the point of they must be being given continuous existence, or I must be given continuous existence, but having first fall into that pitfall first, so that then one can kind of go on to the next step.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that as well, making it more relevant and practical. So, anybody else wants to say something, or if not, let's read the in short. So in short, if the miniature suns and various colors in droplets of water and fragments of glass are not attributed to the sun's reflection and the manifestation of its reflection, one has to accept the existence of innumerable suns in place of the one sun. Yeah, so we have been discussing that. So it necessitates accepting an utterly impossible superstition. In exactly the same way, if everything is not attributed to the absolutely powerful one, it necessitates accepting infinite gods instead of the single God. Indeed, gods to the number of particles in existence. thus falling to the degree of accepting a 100-fold impossibility. So that is what actually shirk, or associating partners to God, is. If whatever the qualities, as we've been discussing, is not attributed to the absolute one or the single being behind it, then it's as if we're saying that every particle has its own sun, and that's how this this impossibility would arise. Yusuf, please go ahead.
Okay, so I need to word this correctly. What the question is, why is accepting this, that there's an infinite amount of suns, an infinite amount of gods, why is it 100-fold impossibility? Because let's say I look at water droplets and I see that they're reflections of the sun, I can verify it, and it's impossible to say that all these water droplets are the sun. It makes sense to me. But then now, okay, we can look at ourselves, maybe we can look at animals, and we can see, animals aren't so smart either, or I'm not so smart. I mean, the humans aren't so smart and capable either, and I can verify it there as well. But then how do I look at I feel like the argument here is it's so impossible because it's so it just sounds ridiculous. That's why it's impossible. It just sounds ridiculous, and that's not really something I can verify. It just, it does sound a bit ridiculous, but it's not such a strong proof for me just because it sounds ridiculous that everything can be a god, that it is everything, an infinite amount of God sounds ridiculous. That's why it's not that way. It must be because I can somehow verify it. And when I look at particles, and I just imagine a particle is infinitely knowledgeable, still it sounds ridiculous, but how do I verify? I can't really just go out of existence and look at it like I can with water droplets and then see that there is an infinite amount of suns there. And I guess it's what would be a way to clarify this for me without calling me a disbeliever?
Okay.
Yeah, so your question is very good. Basically, so you're saying, how do we verify this? And I mean, you yourself said that this accepting that everything has its own sun sounds really ridiculous. That's why it becomes something that is impossible. If one really studies and thinks about it, yes, that does make it something ridiculous to say that everything has its own sun. It's as clear as that. But then to incorporate that into our understanding and really living with that, yes, that definitely takes time. But so does anybody, I know Yusuf wanted to say something. Yusuf, you want to say something on that?
Not really. I was planning to chop off his head after the discussion. You better save him, otherwise we will stone him to death here.
That's funny. Yeah, so I mean, Abdul Rahman, as we were discussing all this, right? I'm sure you can help us also in terms of why this argument, at least the way the Nursi is presenting this, this is in summary kind of scenario where he says, I've discussed the example of each particle, and you're looking at it and you're seeing that the way that the particle is behaving, its relationship with the rest of the world. Don't tell me that, the particle has all those, has its absolute power, absolute knowledge, absolute will to arrange all those things. So that's what at least this fourth flash is highlighting. And then, based on that, in that sense, yes, one can see that this conclusion makes sense, because then, if you think about it, if this continuous relationship with the source of existence is necessary for each particle, then we can say, that sounds ridiculous that if we assign that the official is the one possessing all the absolute qualities that we are experiencing. So anybody else wants to comment on this, add to this? So
go ahead.
I'll
briefly comment so that we will save him. So assuming such a thing is a contradiction in itself, right? So giving divinity to anything within existence, because it's contradicting the definition of divine anyways.
What's the definition of divine?
So we are now talking about something that which, because in the first place, how do I conclude saying that the source of existence of this universe is absolute? Because I do not really see the properties that can give existence to anything in this existence. So I say it needs to be absolute knowledge, absolute power. But now, if I'm not going to say that this absolute is, by definition, should be not of type of this existence, if I deny that, if I don't accept this, either I will say that, no, I'm talking about all the knowledge within the universe that is being manifest is within this single particle. Because when we say absolute, we are saying that the source of this knowledge, which is unknown to me, I mean, not definable, shape, smell, color, anything, but he must exist. This would be my necessary conclusion for an absolute one, which is borrowing Dr. Ali's wording, not of type of this existence. This is logically consistent. But if I deny this and say that, no, this sun cannot be outside, then sun needs to be within everything. But then what is the sun? Let's think about the sun again. Sun means all the manifestation. All the manifestation meaning, so let's say something is being manifest in me, but while, let's say the pollen that Asim was giving example of, when this pollen is flying from one place to another, the manifestation that's taking place in there has to take into account the manifestation of what's going on in the sun. The whole manifestation, like the whole manifestation is spanning the all existence already. Now I'm as if saying that the whole thing, space and time-wise, needs to be within this small particle as well. Since I'm not getting out of this existence now, I need to explain everything in terms of matter or in terms of the creation. So now pack everything in this existence, since you're not allowed to, per your initial condition, get out of this existence, pack all the existence now, materially, put it into every single particle. Such a big contradiction. I mean, this doesn't make sense because as if I am tying myself to arrive to such a conclusion. Why? Because I say source of existence has to be of type of this existence. What does this require? The whole manifestation has to be present within everything. Whole manifestation means the flowers, the cows, and everything. Pack them all together somehow, put it inside a single particle as well. Not only knowledge-wise, power-wise, everything-wise. Life is such a manifestation, right? It's not only knowledge, it's not only wisdom. You also need to pack the manifestation of power in there, manifestation of mercy in there. And you have to go now on the level of manifestation. But once you say, I'm getting out of this existence, because source of existence has to be unlike anything in this existence, then you stop speculating about his nature anyways. So you're not, there's no burden on your shoulder to explain him anymore, because you already declared that he is undefinable from my point of view. I cannot talk about him at all. But if you force yourself, I'm repeating, to say that, no, the source of existence of things are within themselves, now the author is saying that the manifestation is as such that every single particle contains the whole manifestation in it. So you need to then pack the whole thing and put it into here. But since you have to now think in terms of type of creation, like the universe, the existence, everything needs to be in there. As if the same thing needs to be now infinitely, not absolutely, infinitely wide to span the whole universe, yet at the same time being able to fit in a single particle. This is an impossibility. think about a thing which is as wide as universe, yet at the same time fits in a small particle. So this is a contradiction in terms of space, applied to time, applied to colors, applied to anything. Does it make sense?
So we're taking, so if we were, let's say I had this premise or this already like prejudice that I did not want to accept that there was a God, that there was an absolute creator, and I tried to instead look at material existence by itself, then the conclusion I would have to come to, which is what he's saying, is that I would then have to accept actually an infinite number of absolutely powerful beings, basically.
So by definition, you already denied the absolute. Now I am going with the strict sense of word absolute.
Okay, you deny the absolute, but yeah, you have to accept an infinite number of like extremely powerful and knowledgeable beings.
Yeah.
So he's saying you deny one thing, but then you accept this infinite amount on this side.
If we use the word loosely, as if he is saying, with the loose use of word absolute, as if he is saying you deny one absolute, but you admit infinitely many
And
absolutes.
that's why it's ridiculous.
This is ridiculous. But if you would like to go into the impossibility part of it, truly impossibility, logical, contradiction part of it, first of all, you cannot imagine absolute gods or absolute anything within existence. This is contradicting. Because if I say, for example, this particle has something absolute, and when you say particle, you already define it in the first place.
Okay, let's say infinite.
So you will say infinite, very large, big, whatever.
Yeah.
So let's assume universe is so wide, but it has some sort of an end which we couldn't stretch there yet.
Okay.
And let's assume that's all you know about knowledge, power, wisdom, color, whatever. So everything within this closed system, and you say that this closed system is within itself.
Yes.
So now author says the manifestation, the existence is such that any point in this existence requires the knowledge of the whole system, closed system this time. And since you say that there is no external source, because if you say external source, you can go to absolute. When you are within the system, this vast knowledge, vast wisdom, vast power needs to be within every single particle as well, right?
Okay.
So this vast knowledge power is spanning some space and time, isn't it? Now you have to, since there is no undefinable thing, now you need to push this into a, I don't know, tiny particle and assume that the same thing is being manifest within the single particle. It's not a reflection anymore, it's a real sun. This is what the metaphor is saying. It's saying that if you deny the sun up there and deny that this is not a reflection of sun, you have to imagine a real sun inside this tiny water water droplet. But in terms of its mass, in terms of its size, once you say size, of course it's contradiction, right? It's clearly contradiction. Then it is color, it is heat and everything. So it's a contradiction. I mean, this sort of a thinking is already a logical contradiction.
And on the contrary, I can't even see any wisdom or power in a droplet of water.
Yeah, you cannot see it either. But also, it is a logical contradiction. But if you don't want to go that deep, it's one could easily, without getting into this much of depth, one could easily say, I am avoiding believing in one absolute creator, which makes perfect sense because it's the easiest, most straightforward explanation. And if I am, let's say, an unbiased person who is trying to understand what's going on in this existence, yeah, this perfectly explains it. On the other hand, it's too complicated. There's no need for, if I'm going to be trying to find an explanation, yeah, this explains it perfectly. Why shall I go with this very convoluted version of it? And although there are going to be a lot of further problems in it, such as all those godly particles not contradicting with each other, this and that. So on a higher level, on a simpler level, you can simply say that, yeah, this is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Go with this other explanation. But if you would like to go deeper, yes, this other explanation is logically contradictory. It doesn't make any sense at all. it has 100-fold contradiction in there.
But you're saying it doesn't make sense just because everything would have to be in a tiny particle. So everything, the whole existence would have to be in something that is within the existence?
Yes.
Okay. It clicked.
Okay.
Yeah, it clicked.
MashaAllah, good discussion. So as you guys were talking, so if we assign divinity to any one particle, then every other particle must also be assigned divinity because of the way the universe is working, the way the interconnectedness is. But then the way the impossibility happens is if one particle, if we say that it has the absolute will knowledge and the other one has absolute will knowledge, then the particle A has to know B and should be able to command B. Same thing with the particle B, has to know about A and be able to command A. And that is an impossibility. That cannot work at all, logically reasoning. So it's impossible for me also to think that, yes, the sun is in every particle. So that's not the case at all. It cannot be that way.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.